All right, folks, we are back with the Malzberg panel, and boy, do we have a lot to talk about today. Co-host of Steele and Ungar and senior political contributor for Forbes.com, Rick Ungar, is here, and commentator on religion, society, and pop culture, Rabbi Brad Hirschfield, is here as well. All right, let's start with this report, gentlemen, released today against the advice of the Secretary of State, who I never find myself agreeing with. We had an exclusive with General Michael Hayden at the beginning. He denied so much of what was in this report. Of course, there's going to be another report to follow. The CIA will have its say because the CIA, not one person from the CIA was ever approached to be a part of this report. He called it a trial and verdict rendered in absentia. Let's start with you, Rick. Why release this, and really, who cares?
Well, I'll tell you, I think there's people who do care. The problem is, this is, to me, incredibly complicated. On the one hand, I have friends who are ex-CIA who are really concerned about this. Not that something's going to come out that will get them in trouble, but that some of their friends that are currently serving could literally be killed. And that's something you have to take very seriously. On the other hand, it is endemic to our culture. We review these things. If some things went wrong, people deserve to know. But this is a tough balancing act. I'm going to have to read the report to see how I feel that it shakes out.
And Brad, I mean, as Rick alluded to, not only are there some concern for CIA people still in the field, but there's concern for the countries that helped us, and with rendition and et cetera. There's concern for our troops now, and everybody's on higher alert because of Dianne Feinstein.
I think that's right. Look, the issue of torture is complicated. The issue of timing here isn't complicated.
By the way, I
at all.
object to the word torture, but go ahead.
You can call it, but I think we should call it the worst thing anyone wants to call it, and then be clear. The timing is what's completely wrong here. There's nothing complicated about this. There isn't a shred of evidence that exploring this issue now will actually make anyone safer or the United States more accountable, even assuming everything in the report is true. This report was released now for political purposes. And what's troubling should be for everybody, however you feel about enhanced interrogation / torture, is that right now we have senators whose mouths are writing checks their bodies aren't going to have to cash, and that's not right.
Look at that. Another way to look at that, I take your point when you say it's being released for political purposes, but the truth of the matter is, in 3 weeks' time, it wouldn't be able to be released when Republicans take over the Congress. That might be a good thing, that might be a bad thing, but assuming that these senators like Feinstein believe it is critically important that Americans know about this, then it's not really political. It's doing it while they still can.
Well, I think you just proved, Rick, that it is political. Not maybe you want to justify it, but that's the point. If the concern is the Republicans will take over so we can't do it, then they're playing beat the clock. And I'm just really troubled by the idea of playing a game of political beat the clock, especially when we know if you want this to get out later, it can be. This was timed in ways that really, someone needs to prove to me, this isn't a debate about torture. It's about timing things to political advantage when other people's lives are at stake. And that strikes me as really dangerous and really wrong.
I take your point, but you can't get around the fact that the report's about what it's about. Steve doesn't like the word torture. I understand that. But if the entire point of the report is to expose where the United States may have broken the law, then I'm afraid it is about torture. And again, I haven't read it yet. It just came out this morning. So I can't tell you what's in it. But from what I'm aware of, this is, in fact, what this report's about, where the U.S. did exceed its legal authority.
Well, according to who? Because John Yoo, John Yoo and others said that the U.S. Everything they did was perfectly within the law.
This is the Senate doing a very long review, and apparently came to a different conclusion.
Well, it would have been nice if they talked to the people who participated or who ran the.
By the way, I think they did speak to Mr. Yoo. You're right.
No, not you. I'm talking about they didn't speak to any CIA.
No, I know. I was going to say, I think you're right when you say they didn't speak to CIA. They didn't, but they did speak to people who were crafting the policy within the Bush administration, and the CIA, with the exception of the director, would not have been the one crafting the policy.
No, but that proves even further. The way they did is they went after the people who had a political angle on this, rather than talking to people who actually had to live the policy and implement the policy.
You might have some good points here, but I'm afraid you're overdoing it when you want to make it a political thing, because a CIA agent in the field would not be who you'd go to discuss a policy breach or a legal breach.
All right. We're going to change topic when we come back. John Gruber testified before the House Oversight Committee. We'll talk about that just a little bit. But in my opinion, we did what we had to do to stay safe, and we should thank the people who participated and did it in a terrible time in our history, not because of what we did to those terrorists. We're coming back.
By implication, voters who did not like the Obamacare plan did not vote for it, or probably not the stupid ones. And so my district, which voted against the president almost 80%, is full of what you would consider non-stupid people. I'm done with you.
All right. Doug Collins grilling Gruber. Grilling Gruber. I said that once before today. I'll say it again. It sounds like a meal. Anyway, John Gruber was facing the House. Which committee was he on? Oh, yeah, he was facing the House Oversight Committee, and he didn't do too well, according to most accounts. Joining us once again on the panel is the co-host of Steele and Ungar and senior political contributor for Forbes.com, Rick Ungar, and commentator on religion, society, and pop culture, Rabbi Brad Hirschfield. Let me start with you, Brad, and that is, Gruber apologized profusely, but he said what he said over and over and over. And he could deny, as he did, that he was the architect of Obamacare, but he wrote it in his book. And at the beginning of the hearing, it was read back to him from his book by the chairman of the committee.
Look, I think he's getting caught in the problems from top to bottom with Obamacare, and I'm even sympathetic to some of its goals. The problem is, what it set out to do, and we told the American public it was going to do, we're never related to each other.
The dumb American public.
Oh, that's, I mean, the level of contempt here is its own story, and it's really despicable. Because that's one of the things a democratic culture is supposed to hedge against. But here the issue was, if you want to get more uncovered people insured, then tell people that and go out and advocate for it. But to simply tell people this is about reforming health care, which it never was and never did, and it was simply a backdoor way of achieving the first goal, that's the issue. Don't lie to the public. Tell them straight up what you want, and then we can debate it. Some of us may be for it, some of us may be opposed to it, but that's how it's actually connected to him claiming stupidity in the public.
What about it, Rick?
I was amazed by the hearings. You know, obviously, Gruber, or Mick Gruber, as I like to call him, had a drubbing coming, for God's sakes. I mean, what he said was preposterous. But, Steve, here's how things go wrong. That he was the architect. That's not what happened. There was, on the flap of the book, they cite the Washington Post that called him the architect. He didn't write it. This is how little bits of things make everything go mishmash. I was stunned by the hearings because they never got around to going after Obamacare, which I thought was the point. They absolutely nailed Gruber, and as I said, he had to come and he had to know it wasn't going to go well for him, and there was no way he could come out looking good, nor should he have. But they completely missed it. They got hung up in this arcane technical stuff, and I'm sitting there with my jaw hanging down going, when are you guys going to use this jerk to go after Obamacare? They never did it.
I don't think they missed it at all, Rick. I think actually what you're seeing play out here is that sense of betrayal and contempt from Washington for the general public.
Including the very people who are asking the questions.
No, that's exactly what they did, and that's why he even said all of my stupid constituents. Because what I think you're hearing is people saying the debate about the policy of the Affordable Care Act, about Obamacare, is entirely separate and should be separable from whether you call him the architect, the advocate, he's laughing all the way to the bank for having done it. The kind of
Not
contempt,
so much anymore.
The kind of contempt for the American public that fueled this from top to bottom is completely separate from the policy itself and did a lot of damage to all of us, whether you're right, left, or center.
You're making an assumption, which may be correct. I can't sit here and say it's not. You're assuming that he meant those things that he said, that they were true, and maybe they were. Maybe they were. He says they weren't. I don't know. But I got to bring one thing up because it absolutely cracked me up. One of the women, a congresswoman, actually sat in the hearing and said that if you're not a politician, then you don't know what the CBO is, and you don't know what scoring is. And I'm sitting there going, this woman has this guy in front of her for saying that Americans are stupid, which is horrible. And yet she sat there and told us all we were stupid, that we don't know what the CBO is unless we're a politician.
What she said is
people?
that using a bunch of alphabet soup initials for the general public
Do
is
you know
trying
what
to
the
make a
CBO
living.
is?
I do, but guess what? I get to be sitting here with Steve and with you, and we are not
You know
the
what?
norm. And we
My
are not.
wife-
No, you have to understand. We are not
Let
the
me
norm.
end
My
it. Let
wife
me end it on
doesn't do
this.
what we do
We
for a
are
living.
we
She
are
knows what the
far
CBO
Rick.
is.
Rick, and I'll include you in this. We are way above the norm, you, me, and Brad. We'll
There you go.
end it on that happy note. All right, guys. Thank you very, very much. Great panel today. Up next, Gimme 5. An above norm Gimme 5.